As I've said, oh, that's better. Sorry, my apologies. I've got that at least formally out. My apologies for lateness, but we are underway. Although I've put myself under pressure because I need to be away relatively early in the afternoon. So, Scotty, if we need to, as we get through the process, I may have to ask you to take the chair. Perhaps we should take it right from the start. We might get through it quick. I don't know. We'll see how we go. We do have a good full agenda. Thank you very much to the team, Nigel and Stephen, for all that's in these papers. They are a very good set. The risk management update is phenomenal, and we'll have a bit of fun with that. But I will ask that we do try and proceed reasonably quickly. Right, let's start with the normal order of business. Apologies. We have one from Peter. Peter can't be with us today. Nigel, I know you're not a member, but you've got to shoot out at some stage, which is fair enough. Anybody else? I'll put an advance apology in. I'll probably have to be out the door pretty close after 1. So I'll put that in advance for early apologies. Anything else? Everybody else is able to be here? Well, I move from the chair. We sustain those apologies. Thank you, Scotty. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Urgent business? I don't think we have any urgent business. The only thing that I would note relatively related to this is we will change the order slightly. Jess, I just can't quite remember. The external auditors will be with us, what, 11:30, is that right?
11:30 to 12.
Oh, there we are up there, 11:30. They're under time pressure, which I can understand. We all want audits done quickly. And so we've had to sit with their timing of 11:30, and we will, in the middle of that, perhaps just adjourn the meeting so that we could also have some short committee-only time with the auditors. I think that's actually important, this meeting, because it's the last, as you're all well aware, last tronium for this committee. And it's our last chance to hear from the auditors. So a wee bit of break with normal procedure, but at 11:30 we will have Rudy and I presume Jenna, the audit manager, with us at 11:30. We'll see where we're at. Matters of a minor nature, perhaps that was the minor nature, I don't know, it might be major. Any matter of your interests with this agenda you need to raise? No? That's good. Can we go to the minutes of our June meeting? I'm going to move from the chair. We take them as true and correct. Thank you, Scotty. I'm going to look your way, Scotty. You better have your hand up all the time. We'll get through this fast. No. Are there any matters of correction or alteration that you need to raise? Yeah, I do actually. Sorry, it's only ever so minor, but it's slightly important. In 6.4, Jess, the third paragraph, we say the current internal resource and capacity to undertake. I think that Narayan should say the internal resource had or has capacity to undertake the proposed audits. Just a slightly important little word there. I take it it's the word has. We've got the capacity to do the work program, right? Yes? Good. So I think it should be has. Rightio. I think it's probably the key thing. That was the only minor change I had. Doesn't feel like anybody else has got anyone, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. We can go to the action register. We have, thank you for this, by the way. I think this was a request, Janice, that you made at the last meeting, which is quite good, so thank you for that. The first one was meeting on Fitch, and I think that will occur in the first. I say we. I'm assuming it will include me, but let's see where that gets to. In December with Fitch, and I provided somebody, Jess, is it Megan or somebody, with a suggestion about what they might brief us on. But in short, it's really so that we can have, as a committee, a better understanding of how they think about rating and grading. So in other words, we need to know the game they play, because it will be important for us, particularly as we go into the next LTP, to figure out how that could or might or might not affect our grading. So that's a good reason to come to the 1st of December meeting. And then the IT strategy is currently under development and being workshopped with senior leadership team. So I presume we've still got that on the action item. Any sense, Stephen, about when we can see it or discuss it? Oh, Oh, Jason, well done. Haven't seen you for a while, mate. Good to see you here. Thank you. I should have scanned the room properly.
Yeah, no, we've made good progress. We've had 2 half-day meetings and brainstorming with SLT just to make sure that we're in line with the LTP pillars and Nigel's vision, and they all align. So we will have that ready to come to the next ARC meeting.
Rightio, the next ARC meeting, so December. Brilliant. That's great. Thank you for that. I think that would be useful because even when we get into the, I appreciate I'm looking partly at PX, but once we get into that, it's been a constant request, if I can put it that way. That'll be great development. The only other thing that I had, which isn't on the action register, which I think, Jess, that we were interested in, was actually when we discussed the sensitive expenditure policy at the last meeting. We actually asked, could you let us know what policies we are responsible for and when they're coming up? I think there was a concern that otherwise policies come up in a semi-ad hoc or rather potentially either they come under pressure because they're out of date or whatever. So I wonder if we could just add that to the list, Jess, and hopefully, Stephen, it wouldn't be too hard for that list to come to the next meeting, please, if that's possible. Anything else, folk?
Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, Janice.
On 6.9 in the minutes, it was that we requested confirmation from an accounting standards perspective that our current policy of asserting fair value historic cost from 2005 is still appropriate. It would be useful if that was on the action register, I think.
Yeah.
So that we don't lose sight of that request.
That's a really good point, although that would be relevant to talk about today as well when we get to the annual report. Yes, please. So that's 6.9, Jess, if we could add asserting fair value as it stands at 2005. What we're really saying is that historic cost of our assets is fair value. That might be a stretch. Okay, brilliant. Rightio. So with that, firstly, thank you. We have a register too. Thank you for the work that's done. And I'm going to move that we receive and note the updates. Thank you, Scotty. Oh, Michelle, thank you. beaten to the hammer. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Stephen, there we are now. Work program, please.
Through you, the Chair, Audit and Risk Committee work program. The noted changes for 5.1. The October 2025 meeting has been removed since the last meeting. This additional meeting was for the purpose of adoption of the annual reports of 2024-25. The end of the triennium and the inauguration of the new council falls at this time. Thus, this will now be endorsed by the Audit and Risk Chairperson at the council meeting on 31st October 2025.
Thanks, Nariam. So that is just it sort of blends with a later item around the annual report, which is that in essence it's a post-election adoption, which is fair enough. And there's perhaps, well, we are going to hear at least today how the audit is progressing, but it does mean the committee hasn't seen the draft annual report. I presume there is a draft, Andrea, is that right? There must be.
It's currently work in progress.
It's work in progress, okay. So in effect, this committee is unable to hand over to the new council, whether that's new in reality or just new in name because it's a new triennium, any strong lead from this committee, Stephen. So that's not quite how we would want it, but that's the reality of the position we're in, I think. Is that correct?
Yep, they agreed first draft with audits coming out on Thursday, so it's just a bit of a misalignment in that regard. Members of after the election, members of the reformed Audit and Risk Committee will get the document.
Yeah.
Prior to adoption, though, so they do get.
Can I say, are you going to do that between the 11th and the 31st? I appreciate there might be a personal interest in the answer to that question. All I'm reflecting is that there actually is not a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. Can I just say something? So the intention is there is an October 7th council meeting.
Yep.
So the intention is to take the full draft to that point, to that meeting, and it will also be circulated to both yourself and Janice as external parties. So that will be the opportunity for the current council to reflect, I guess, on the year behind, and if there's any commentary or anything that they feel that they would like to add to that report,
Right.
then that's the time.
Okay, well, look, I thank you. That's more comforting then. I think it's, I guess I'm just feeling, Stephen, a sense of responsibility here that I don't like us not able to fulfil our ability. And I mean, it's not a criticism, it's just as, if that's the case, Janice, are you in a position, if we get a draft to you on Thursday, to be able to provide comment before the 7th of October?
This Thursday.
I think that's what you were saying, this Thursday? This Thursday it comes out?
This Thursday is the draft to audit.
Yeah, the draft. Yeah,
So we could circulate
that's
it.
probably the one that we can only physically work with at this stage. You got some time? Brilliant. Okay. Yes, Stacey.
So, Andrea, is there any formal process on that 7th? I'm just, obviously, normally it would come to here, and so on the 7th, is it just note and receive, or will it be, oh yeah, okay.
And obviously, any feedback, could be taken on board.
Okay. Let's just work that one through. I perhaps outside the meeting, Janice, perhaps there may be a chance for you and me to agree to a time to have a short call with Andrea and Stephen, I just feel like it gives us a slightly more formal feedback into your meeting on the 7th, rather than really your question, are we just receiving without any sort of update? That would make a lot of sense. So that would be great. I also note, because I'm always worried about the letter of representation as well, but we've got a good paper from you, Elliot, around legislative compliance, which is a big part of that letter. And in fact, even in the PX, we've got a discussion around the internal audit plan, and that's dealing with fraud awareness and what have you. Again, that's one of those sorts of key sign-offs we do. So that should give us a relatively informal but important lead into that meeting on October the 7th, and then ultimately 31st of October. That's great, Stephen. That's superb. I don't think we need to note that down, Nari, and for we are affirming there is no formal October meeting of the committee. But I'm comfortable we've got slightly more defined arrangements between now and the 7th for what the council will pass over to the incoming council, which is fine. Any other thoughts or comments on the program? Already developing a reasonable one for December. That'll be good fun. So I'm going to move from the chair that we receive and we note. Nigel, thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Brilliant. Okay, bit of work before the auditors join us. Marianne, how are we going on the recommendations? Essentially, we're waiting for them to sign off whether we've cleared things. Is there anything else you want to? No? Any questions then, guys, on primarily the business is all in the appendix or the tables? Is there any comments folk would like to make? Yes, Michelle.
So I just have a couple of questions. One is on number 17, the breach of legislation on the hearing fees. And I just wondered, what are we doing there? Are we choosing to do nothing? And if that is what we're choosing to do, why don't we just note that? I think it says that we're still waiting. We've sought some legal advice and advice from the Chair of Audit and Risk on what our next steps are, but that's kind of the last update we've had, which was, the May one, but it seems to have just been left lying.
Yep, can we take that offline? I had that circled as well,
Okay.
because as far as I know, I've done my bit. So
Yep.
it's not quite up to date, but as it involves
Yeah,
individuals,
okay.
I'd like that to be taken offline. Steve,
Sure.
we could have a discussion on that afterwards, please. That would be really great. It's a good question, Michelle. It was one that
It's okay. And then I just had another question about number 18, so the high annual leave balances. And I know we have a different report in PX, but it's hard to determine from this if we're making progress or not. And so I wondered if we could note what it was last year. Are we actually getting better or worse? Because we can't tell from this report.
It's a good question. Thank you.
We can bring that to the 7th of October to do a better report on it. Council meeting. I think it is improving.
It would
Just be good to note it in the status update because it's been highlighted as something to monitor, and it's hard to tell from looking at this report in isolation whether we're making progress or not.
I mean, I don't suspect it's a big input, but it even comes to our health and safety report as well, Michelle. So your point is very well made. Thank you. Any other? Yes, Scotty?
Yeah, thank you. Looking at the point number 19, the annual report preparation, and I noted the work that your team, Andrea, is doing preempting any of the issues, which is well done, and how much is actually looking like it's going to land again in open recommendations in the next year, and also how do we ensure that it doesn't take a full year to address each of these recommendations?
Good question in regards to how much is going to end up on here. We don't know until such time that they do the audit. There was a lot last year, change of auditors. So we've tried to preempt what we think that they may challenge us on. But they only formally do an interim audit and a year-end audit. So anything that's on here, typically if it hasn't been covered off in the interim audit, then we have to wait till the end of the year. So in short answer to your question, I don't know how many will end up on here, but we're hoping to clear a lot of these and actually start fresh.
And do you think that with our new structure in place, we will be better able to address some of these things in a more timely manner?
Yes.
I think, Scotty, good question, by the way, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, by the way. I think when we get Rudy's report this year, we should work with management as to what is the program to nail these. I know, in a sense, the program's here because of the dates, but I think we need to look a bit more carefully at what are the implications of the recommendations and what would it take to get rid of. Rid of, that's the wrong word, to action the recommendations in a way that's beneficial for us. Because my assumption is that any of the recommendations they make are beneficial to our management and governance. Hence, we have a right to say they aren't beneficial and turn them down, but we just have to be aware of the risks, by the way. But that sort of engagement and cross-table discussion would be valuable. So I really do like your idea. Okay, any other? Yes, Janice.
The management feedback is important in that regard in terms of establishing the priorities and the ease or the simpleness of the fix. I had a question, Andrea. It relates to item 14 in this list about the impairment assessment for investments in subsidiaries. But typically, your Audit and Risk Committee would receive reports on valuations, impairment assessments, etc., to sort of give assurance to council that it's been looked at and reviewed. We haven't seen anything yet. Is there a report coming with the draft accounts, or is there any significant impairment? Presumably there's a paper being done on impairments.
There hasn't officially been a paper done for impairments, but it could be something that we could bring to the October meeting. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing significant.
But I think it's usually good practice to actually have something done saying we've looked at impairments and there's nothing significant because of rah.
Sure.
It just provides assurance to council when they're signing it off.
I think it'd be a fair bet. It must be a question on your audit dashboard, which only goes back to your point, Janice, that this would be normally done formally. Look, and I appreciate change has been going on, but this is just normal audit evidence. Or sorry, wrong word. This is normal annual report preparation evidence, which also flicks into being audit evidence as well. So your point's well made. You guys must have all been looking at my notes, because that was one that I actually had, Janice, which is where are we at with impairment? Obviously I hear your point. You're saying informally no, there's no impairment. Perhaps there is a paper there needs to be some more formal communication, because that is. And I've been hassling me and Nigel about our value of our investments at various stages. That's actually a really important question, I think, for us strategically going forward. That's not signalling policy, that's just me as your independent audit chair saying this is an area of focus for me. Okay, anything else, folk, that we need to know? We do hope best of luck with the audit, but actually a good number go. Andrea, I know there is effort in behind this, so we're perhaps wanting more, but thank you that we've got that, and it'll be interesting to see where we get to.
If I can just go back to that impairment.
Sorry, yep.
It depends on also how TDHL are treating their investments. So they've got two big investments. One is in Alpine, the other one is in the port company.
Yep.
And it gets down to how do they treat those, because I'm not sure. We can only impair TDHL.
That's
we
right.
can't impair the other two. And we'll have to look hard at what are they doing.
I agree entirely, but I mean, it still reflects that ultimately, I mean, I'm only out of suck eggs here, Nigel, but we are responsible for reporting a group result. Actually, and a parent result. I mean, this is the parent actually that we're worried about, aren't we? I mean, the parent result for us is important, but also because of the then downstream financial planning and management. I'm telling you how to suck eggs, mate, I know, but that becomes important. It actually opens up a broader thing about the strength of the relationship with TDHL, which I don't want to get into because I'm risking getting into an area that I don't have any direct experience of here. Okay, so we receive and note the outstanding recommendations. I'm going to move it. Who's going to second for me this time? Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, is carried. Narayan, your internal audit activity, please. Good succinct report, a one-pager. I love it.
Through the chair, internal audit activities. Health and safety audit has been completed and the report is included in the PX. Operational audit of Timaru wastewater treatment plant. The report has been completed and submitted for management comments. Review of land information memorandum audit. This audit is in progress. This audit was delayed due to the operational audit of Timaru wastewater treatment plant. Internal audit 3-year plan. The proposed plan is included in the internal audit quarterly report in the PX. Awareness of the internal audit functions to be undertaken this quarter with the senior leadership team and the officers as we have finalized the restructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Narayan. Appreciate that. Folk, do we have questions or comments on Narayan's report? Yes, Scotty.
Just a very quick one. Regarding the review of the LIM process, and there it says in progress, just a reminder with any of these things, I'm a big fan of dates. Yeah, where we're at with these things. Yeah.
That was going to be my point, is when are we going to get them? I'd like to see that included in here.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I couldn't, so firstly, yes, we'll have a good discussion when we get to your health and safety audit. Thank you, as you've said in PX. I noticed the LIM one is you always think what is value? I mean, LIMs have been in the press recently, haven't they, over what should be included at a more national level. And I also happen to notice that on page 79, when looking at, who am I looking at, customer services, the LIM process is quite high risk for them. So it's a good connection between what's happening both nationally but also our internal risk profile operationally. So it's great to see that this will be a piece of work that will be beneficial when it comes out. Certainly the other ones will be as well, but I just happen to notice that. Questions, comments, folk? No? Can we move to the recommendations which we received, the update, and we can confirm the upcoming areas to audit? Well, perhaps I've said that really quickly, Narayan, on behalf of the committee. So I'll move it. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Stacey. Is there, just before we move that, was there, the second bit was we confirm the upcoming areas. You guys are happy with what we're doing here? I am. Okay, cool. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Righty, sensitive expenditure coming back to us. Thank you. It's Brendan, isn't it? That's right, Brendan. Thank you, I appreciate that, and thank you for coming back, showing great responsiveness to especially our comments, but obviously you've had a discussion with staff as well, so in your hands.
Good morning, committee, thank you. Nigel and I are pleased to present the report endorsement of the proposed final sensitive expenditure policy for the committee. I'll take the report mainly as read, but just note a couple of things. When we met with this committee several months ago, we got your thoughts and feedback, which was incorporated into the policy that went out for consultation, with, I will note, one brief exception, and that was, Mr. Chairperson, you had mentioned in the previous meeting looking for some sort of indicator to reflect the aspect around in the policy where it talks about sensitive expenditure isn't necessarily an issue around sometimes its value, but the cumulative effect of it.
Yeah.
When we as officers did a little bit of work to see how we could reflect that in the policy in terms of an indicator, Andrea advised that might cause some system issues to, which I'm sure she can speak to if she wishes. We consider that that's covered through another indicator, which is the one around policy breaches more generally. So happy to have a discussion with you around that, but just wanting to note more broadly that we incorporated all that feedback. We went out for consultation with staff and we received a number of submissions. Most of those were, as the report notes, on the appendix, and the report breaks down what that feedback was and what officers' comments are on that, and then flows through to tracked changes both for the policy and the appendix. We invite your thoughts on the policy and hopefully your endorsement of it. We also invite separately your thoughts and feedback on the appendix, which will go to SLT, ultimately going through to the Chief Executive for his approval in the not too distant future. Nigel, is there anything that you want to comment?
Don't think so, Brendan. We've had a few goes at this. We've cut and pasted everything. We've taken comments on board, particularly the internal review, and we think we've got a very robust document.
Happy to take questions and feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think we should try and help and encourage you to get to the finalisation of this. So unless there was a real fatal flaws seen by the committee, I'd like to think we've done our bit. If I've got questions or comments for Brendan and team here. Yes, Scotty.
Really just a question. I think it's very comprehensive. I think you've done a great job and I largely agree with all of the officers' comments. Just regarding the car wash thing, which was interesting and makes good sense to me, how are you going to manage that? What are the thoughts around that?
It's been the major bugbear of this sensitive expenditure was the car washes. My considered opinion is that if you have a vehicle and you have it to go to and from, wash the damn thing. Reality. That's my opinion anyway.
Maybe a more nuanced comment from me.
Well, it's going to be quote of the day. Well done, Brendan.
Bring my support person with.
Sorry, Nigel. The first thing I'll glibly comment on is if car washes are the bugbear, then we're probably doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And the second thing is to note is that a lot of this already occurs and is managed under current systems. It is monitored. Abuse can be identified. Vehicles are tracked to individuals. So, if I take the vehicles that are most likely to need a car wash, drainage and water, LTU, park ones, going into the backs of beyond, they're assigned to individuals, or if they're not, then it's tracked as to who has them at particular times. So if the fleet manager and Susie as the GM and anyone else who's monitoring that starts to see issues, then that can be flagged and actioned and followed up.
Thanks, Scotty. And thank you for the pithy response. I quite like that. It was quite good. Just clean it. Okay, any other questions or comments from folk here? Look, to me, perhaps the observation I had, as always in these situations, it's active monitoring. Firstly, it's education. It's understanding by the people that commit the expenditure that actually they understand what constitutes good integrity and sensitivity in spending public funds in the way that we've been doing. And well done, having a discussion about whether a car wash is part of that or isn't, I think is actually really important. What it does, Brendan, though, places a lot of emphasis on the ability to monitor. And that is the critical thing. It puts pressure on your team leads, whoever it is that signs these off under delegated authority. That becomes the question. So as you've said, even if it's something like a car wash, you're starting to say, so what I've got to keep in mind, what is the activity I've seen from this person? Do I go look at the GPS and see where they've been, yada, yada, yada. It does take a wee bit of effort to monitor. I don't think there's any easy way around that, actually. I mean, I looked at that in terms of the entertainment and hospitality section where, people wanted sort of hard rules. And I think you guys have said, well, it's not, you need a bit of flexibility around that. It does place then the emphasis on the monitor control in terms of this, so that's fine. Look, and thank you for raising the issue with me about my concern that we worry about the cumulative nature. So one car, every individual car wash is justifiable, but 104 times in a year becomes questionable. Hopefully before 104 it becomes questionable, but you know what I mean. So each one would be totally justifiable, I'm sure, as a good council or business purpose, but really. So again, all I can say there is that actually it comes back to the monitoring framework that deals with that. So it just becomes really important that I think we, subject to any other person's comments, I think you've got this in pretty good shape. We agree that this gets signed off, and then in terms of your broader approach around integrity and sensitive expenditure, the whole education thing and the monitoring thing gets emphasised throughout the organisation.
I think if I could just add to that also, when we sent this out for consultation, and we've spent many hours over this document, the reality is where we do have the monitoring in place, we do have the policy exists.
Yep.
What we're trying to do is change that psychology at the front end.
Yeah.
To make those evaluated and justifiable decisions right at the start, so we avoid any real issues.
Yeah, great. No, that's music to my ears. That's tremendous. And yes, Nigel.
Just a comment on the car wash. My only concern is that we're getting best value for our clean vehicles, and so do people have flexibility just to go to a car wash with their fuel card, or are we procuring from a car wash place to get the best value out of our car washing?
It's certainly something we can look at, Nige. We don't actually.
I don't imagine it's a massive cost.
SLA or anything else, but yeah.
But it would be interesting to know. Yeah, and I mean there's new businesses in town.
I did both my cars on the weekend at Superwash down at
yeah. So it'd be interesting to see what the options are. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we can investigate that.
Thank you for that. Any other thoughts or comments? Any other questions either on the policy or indeed the appendix? No? It looks like we're there. Thank you for that. You guys have gone through a thorough process, so well done. And as I say, I think, Brendan, from our perspective, assuming you've done all your other ticks and crosses and you take this through SLT, we don't need to see this back at this stage. We appreciate the work that's gone in and the thoroughness with which you've gone through it. So the motion is that we endorse the proposed sensible expenditure. Scotty, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Michelle, put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you, guys. That's wonderful. Appreciate your work. Hello, and the sensitive expenditure quarterly review. G'day. Ashley, sorry, Ashley, I think we've met before. Sorry, nice to see you. In
Good
your hands.
morning. Pretty standard report this quarter. I'll take it as read and happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. $4,376. See, that's where I start looking at cumulative natures of sensitive expenditure, but I don't personally have any trouble at this stage. You'll be pleased to know. Folk, got questions or comments? This is our chance. Bearing in mind, we've just dealt with the policy. There are appropriate approaches and monitoring. This is just our chance to see, are we interpreting our policy in a way that's reasonable, or perhaps even worse, unreasonably? Any thoughts or comments people want to raise at this point? Look at that, Ashley, nobody has. I'm going to see if there's somebody prepared to move that we receive and note the Centre Financial Report. Somebody prepared to move that for me? Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Janice. Any discussion on the motion? Well, you haven't raised any questions, so I presume not. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you, Ashley. Look at that, simple as that. Thank you. Important, nevertheless, so I do appreciate the fact that staff have brought that, to us. It's really important. Stephen, quarterly risk report, please. They're very interesting. You've seen an operational side of life through all these great sheets. Thank you.
Yep, so we'll, through the Chair, we'll take the report as read. This is our annual presentation of the operational risk register, which is the kind of deep dive into what people's attitudes to risks are across the organisation. We're still working on the old Excel system. That's why the layout quality of the reporting isn't fantastic at the moment, but we are working with IT on a Power BI based way of pulling the information out, which will be a lot tidier. The big update for this register was Land Transport actually did a sort of root and branch redo of theirs, which reframed a lot of their risks into more strategic ones, which, although it's an operational risk register, it still has quite a wide scope to try and boil all the risks into sort of a tidy list. So having a smaller number of more strategic ones is quite useful. That's probably put them up the ranks of the high-risk activities, which sort of traditionally would pull out as the strategic risks. So we'll have to review that and see if that's actually a true reflection of things before we present the strategic risk register to you at the December meeting. So open to any questions, or there's some people in the back that can ask them as well.
Thank you, Stephen. Look, and again, this is well done. Just a couple of broad comments and a question from me. Operational risk is the responsibility of management and us, okay? But we haven't got, we've got time today to look at this, but obviously each quarter we don't get this level of detail. Our responsibility is to ensure that Nigel and Stephen and team have a reasonable risk management process in place to manage these risks. So having said that, Stephen, the question I want to ask you is, where are you at in the cycle of developing risk awareness and management with your activity managers, obviously through your SLT colleagues, but clearly Tier 3 staff are really important as far as this is concerned. How does this how do you manage and monitor, number one? Number two, how does it drive performance?
The new structure is going to be quite helpful for that, as there's a lot more people at that strategic risk level, especially in relatively high risk areas like drainage and water and land transport. And as part of the sort of the reset of the organisation through the organisation, it's a good opportunity to actually start drilling down. We'll also have, hopefully, a new system in place, which I'm a slightly broken record when it comes to that, which will make managing these things a lot easier. At the moment, it's based on an Excel spreadsheet, which is very smart and very, very detailed, but it's very easy to break. So actually, people's management of it can't be particularly live going ahead, whereas what I've been shown so far of the new system is it allows for more management, and it's that risk as everyday activity rather than something we rush to do to pull out for a report each year. What I want to see is, as these risks emerge, what our strategic risks actually were, as I think the general understanding at SLT level is that we didn't really think they were reflective of the actual strategic risks for the organisation. Some things like community engagement seem to score quite high because it was eye of the beholder stuff. So formally reviewing those as we go ahead to make sure it actually does meet with our expectations. And that's why I think more voices at the table at SLT is actually going to really help in that regard, because we can be quite focused. So yeah, no, it's like anything, it's a work in progress, but we've got good basis here, I think. Everyone sat down and actually reviewed their operational risks, and I think it's actually, although it's not the tidiest document in the world, it's actually quite a good quality document. So it's a really good basis for us to move on next. Formal training, probably after the next election, there's a good opportunity to take the councillors through it and, I mean, with yourself, get their understanding of risk and what their expectations should be. And then from there, it kind of sets down Stafford's. So, I mean, I don't think it will ever be a one and done type process, but it's just keeping that sort of ticking over.
So look, I again, I appreciate, obviously we're an organisation that's been substantially affected by the structural change, and that's not a criticism, it is what it is. I will be interested to better understand along the way how SLT and perhaps GMs do within their teams keep this live.
Yep.
My sense is your answer to that would, Bruce, give us time, and I understand that, but I will be interested to see how that drives through, because as I said, our need is to understand your system of management rather than getting into the weeds.
I would say we do need to actually formalise that. Now we're sort of forming a new SLT group, so it is formalising how that works down across the organisation. It will be quite important. But there's a lot more, I'd say there's a lot more line of sight these days, so it's going to be a lot easier than it would have been previously.
Look, I wonder if the committee's open, and you are, Stephen, if we could just have that on the action register, please, that perhaps you come back with the forward risk development, internal risk development plan. That would make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, what I'd be expecting to present in December would be a sort of detailed, finalised strategic risk register based on the new SLT group.
Yeah.
And then with that, I can just put in the formal process from that point.
Brilliant. That'd be great, Mark. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, that was, sorry, I wanted to have that conversation just to get it right. So it's for information, but it's also for analysis. Janice.
So, Stephen, the question I had was, had this been moderated, that process you're discussing around it going through SLT, being pulled through into the strategic risk register, the critical risks, is that the moderation process I'm looking for?
Yeah, I would say so. I think we need to, this first stage was the big task of getting everyone to actually sit down and think about it again.
Yeah.
And then, the next few stages we'll actually start reviewing them all and looking at, because the moment, I mean, to be honest, the strategic risk register that's just spat out from the raw scores is reasonably chimes with what people would think are quite risky activities in the organisation, but I suspect there is some quirks in there that aren't really picked up yet. Probably drainage and water's the interesting one, but because we're in a kind of transition stage with them now as they go to a company, they're going to have to do a significant amount of work themselves to put their own strategic risk register in place for the company.
So each area that's developed their operational risk register, do they, and maybe this is part of your education thing, do they have an understanding of risk appetite and tolerance, etc.?
Yeah, when they were originally done a couple of years ago, they were fully taken through that and briefed. So it's probably... Yeah,
a couple of years ago, but is it still live? And
I'd say so. I mean, the instructions within the Excel system we do have, it's quite clear what it has quite clear definitions in there, so it's not too challenging in that regard, I would say. But again, as we move on to a new system, it will be a good opportunity to re-up that and actually...
So when I looked at this, I focused on the high, but particularly the very high ratings that people had come up with, and with apples and oranges, it seemed to be an issue. So that was where I got to moderation. But which areas are of greatest concern to you? Which mitigants should be given priority? Is that going to be part of your process? Are you not there yet?
I mean, the problem is because councils have such a wide remit that, I mean, say the pools have a drowning risk, which is quite high, but we mitigate that through having lifeguards and stuff like that. So the focus is all quite different for them, whereas the drowning risk at, say, for drainage and water is quite different, but still there. So it is quite hard to, I would say, compare operational risks on an even basis because of just the sheer range of stuff council does. But Yeah, that's where our moderation really will come in, is taking a kind of common sense filter on that, because I don't think a purely numerical version of it will ever give you what the strategic risks of the organisation are, because say a pool closure, although it's not bad from a health and safety risk, from a reputational risk for the organisation, it's pretty large.
Yeah, and it depends whether council is prepared, if there are still some very high risks, that even when they're mitigated, they stay very high, whether that's acceptable. And we have the inherent, the residual, there was no target, and maybe there doesn't need to be on the report. But
I think what the next step is, SLT needs to start going through these, starting with the very high as a start point, because I think some of this does reflect the various managers' risk appetite.
Yeah.
You just can't avoid that. It'll be inherent in some of these residual risks, whereas when you get SLT, I know the last time we did this SLT, there was quite a lot of debate, and that was reflecting again the interpretation and the risk appetite for those various different people on the SLT. The other thing I think we've also got to do is sort out some of these in here are bordering on strategic risks rather than actually operational risk. And the classic one is the district plan. District plan is not fit for purpose, very high. So whoever's done that in our planning area, district planning, is clear. It's saying not fit for purpose. And now that's a big strategic risk.
That was concerning to look at that. So it's a great piece of work to see it here, and all of those that have contributed in their areas should be commended for the fact that they've put that in there. I was just intrigued to see where it went.
And we do have a risk card in our tolerance line, but that basically just runs slap bang down the middle of the grid. So having a more nuanced version of what our appetite actually is going ahead will be quite important, and that could be a good discussion to have in December as well.
Thanks there, Janice. Any other questions or comments from folk? Yes, Michelle.
So I made little comments and notes all the way through this, but again, like Janice, it came back to that moderation, because some people have identified key personnel as a risk, but I would have thought nearly every department should have that on there. So I'm keen to see the revised version once it's been moderated. I think some are way too in the weeds and some are much higher, and there should probably be a balance. And for example, just off the top of my head, there's something about tenants not paying their rent, whereas I would have thought the risk is actually more around the lease. And I do wonder about, the initial risks, some of them are really high, and I'm going, well, somebody not paying their rent, it's not ideal, but it's not a major, I wouldn't have thought. So it's getting that calibration right, and even at the end, I think, you said you'll focus on the high risk areas, but actually think it needs a focus on the evaluation in some points, because we've ended up with something that's really low risk that I'd go, I think you've got your rose tinted glasses on. So that calibration part will be really interesting.
I'd say at the initial formation of this, people were told to sort of think, particularly with the operational one, they were thinking in a bubble, what is the risks for and probably things for different departments.
Did they do that together so they learnt off each other?
No, it was done on an individual basis.
Totally in a silo, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's something we could really do in a room.
No, it's hard to do in a room, but just sharing what everyone had, and like whether one person goes, I never thought about that, that's really relevant for me as well, like the key personnel one that you saw, and maybe two, but I would have thought that would be more across the board. I thought, it's a great piece of work, but I think there's still a lot of work to go to get that calibration right. And I also thought, because probably at times I slipped into strategic risk rather than operational, so at what point do we see everything? Because if we think of the airport, for example, the first thing I said is the biggest risk is Air New Zealand not operating there. And it's not on there, but that's probably because it's a strategic risk. So it's kind of making sure, given that we only see these at a point in time every couple of months, making sure that we haven't missed a risk because we've been looking at the strategic risk separate to the operation risk.
And that's a really interesting point. Like, when you look at the airport, you go, Air New Zealand is our biggest risk if they're not there. Whereas there'll be others in the organisation will be going, it's no risk at all.
For example, we've got the loss of the buildings as a major risk, but I would have thought the runway is the bigger risk because you can land planes still without a building. But if your runway is not there, so I just kind of think, workshopping in the senior leadership team will be a really interesting exercise.
Yeah, I think that's a very helpful point, and I'd actually, by the way, agree. I think your runway and Air New Zealand are your biggest risk to your airport. You got nobody coming. You've no point for an airport, and you only have to look at. Sorry, having audited many airports, it's always who's coming. So look, that's really helpful. I actually think, if I could respond, Nigel, your planning group to have the district plan as high risk. It might be strategic, but I'm glad it's on their radar because they're our port of call for that. And so I read this with some interest in terms of trying to think, what would I be expecting to see on my strategic risk register as a result of looking at this? Bearing in mind, strategic risk is a combination of both top-down and also bottom-up. And I think this is what I would perhaps reflect here. A lot of this that I've read, quite rightly, and I don't actually have any trouble with this, is bottom-up. So the question becomes, it's probably correct for the individual unit manager, team lead to have that as, I was really interested. I mean, I love your art gallery, and I was looking at, are we sensitive and aware to people that need a guide dog? Was one of those risks. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. But then I thought about it, actually, if I'm delivering customer service, that probably is right. If I'm on the front desk at the Argentay, do I know what it is when somebody comes in with a dog? And I thought, actually, to me, I can understand that. I mean, when I say it's in the weeds, I don't mean that disrespectfully. It is truly operational, and I'm not going to get there. But I just want to reflect the value of what I've seen coming through. And in effect, at this point, validation, if they feel these are the risks, they are the risks. Albeit I will take your point, Michelle, and I totally agree with you about the need for SLT to workshop these. Have we got the right risks, or are we missing any? So if I go back to your AirPoint example, absolutely 100% agree. So I'm always interested in what might become strategic, but Nigel, you've got a comment to make before I keep going.
Yeah, and look, I agree 100% with you. I mean, this is a bottom up, but when you look at that district plan, that's possibly not a risk, it's a complete frustration, potentially.
Yes.
Because they'll be getting consents all over the place and they're being stymied by our own document. And you go, what's that about?
No, I take your point, but here's part of the benefit, isn't it? It's stimulated the conversation. And actually, really what we're talking about, it's not whether it's a risk or not, but where does the ownership lie?
Yeah.
Who is managing that risk becomes the critical question. So it's valid. I think what I'm trying to say is I'm reading here, not stuff that's perhaps raw as understating it, Stephen, but I do sense that from a systems perspective, you've still got a bit to go to refine these as being absolutely right.
Yep.
Okay, I've got some observation, but beside Nige, Stacey, any comment you'd like to make? I was interested in one little theme that came through, and there's probably a number, I haven't really tried to theme it up, but it was really spurred on by going through it and then seeing how it came out actually in land transport. And this is the staffing of the EOC and emergency management. It seems to be a constant theme through these. Would I be right in that, Stephen?
Yep. Having staff available and having staff trained and willing to, because it's always a bit of a voluntold type thing.
Yeah.
And it's probably, to be honest, that's probably a reasonably council-wide one, because I remember from doing EOC activities at some other councils that they always did struggle to get staff willing to kind of come out when the balloon went up. So yeah, no, it's probably, it's one of those ones it is quite operational.
Yep.
To be honest, it's just having boots on the ground whenever you need them. But the scale of what could be happening at the time does make it quite a serious risk when it comes up to it.
Which actually raises the question, so what are we doing about it? Can I be asked? Which is
so-
too early, but it just as I flicked through them
Yep.
and looked at particularly what was going, some sort of orange,
there is a-
red area, this seemed to be an area that might be one that strategically is a bit of a focus.
So our civil defence manager, or yep.
Yeah, well, there's training tomorrow. We have training every other week, basically, and we try and get as many people along as we can. It seems to be the same cohort of people that come, and it feels like it always has. It doesn't seem to be getting better, but it doesn't seem to be getting worse. So I think in a significant event where we might have to stand up an EOC for, say, 3 to 4 days, 24 hours, I think that would be our limit. And then we would be looking to group for C10 or to provide some surge capacity from out of district or even from NEMA. But I think with the staff that we have, we're about 3 to 4 days, which is about where it's always been, which is always makes us nervous because we can't choose the scale of event that we get. We just have to hope it's a fairly concentrated area so that we can get help from outside. I think that's the thing
Audit becomes, Paul, is actually, so what's our risk appetite? What's our risk appetite that we, is it valid? I mean, again, this is the debate, Stephen, as you quite rightly said, goes around the country. Is it quite right that we've got to say a 3-day capacity and then we are, by acknowledgement, reliant on surge capacity from other councils? Is that a valid way of going forward? I'm looking here for the outcome.
Yeah,
I hear your input point. I hear your input point about, same old come, and by hockey we should be praising those people that do come. But actually, is that an adequate response out of Timaru District?
It's a good question.
And that's, so I'm looking here for the outcome on it. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, you've got to have a week's supply. But what happens if we decided that was, looking at the past events, that was the real number? I'm looking therefore for the management action that actually says it's not a case of just having the same old, if I can use that tired analogy, but actually we need to do something more that's more constructive. In other words, the risk starting to drive some of our management responses, what I'm looking for. So I'm not being critical. All I'm trying to reflect here is having the full discussion around what are the implications of our risk assessments. That's really what I'm trying to get to. Yes.
Yeah, and I think you've got to pedal right back because educating people on EOC work is on top of their current jobs.
Absolutely.
That's where it starts, and that's got to be thought through in terms of and how deep are we reaching through the organisation. And you probably look at it, and we're probably only reaching tier 3, and we're not getting right down into to everyone. So that needs a whole plan around it itself. Because
all I'm trying to reflect here, I agree entirely, because I'd make arguments. Well, okay, so do we have it totally understood with our CTAG, as you call it, colleagues? We've got 4 days capacity, and day 5 we need your help.
I think we're considered quite good in Canterbury in terms of being operators, and we have been tested.
Yeah.
The last time we were tested to sort of 5-6 days was, I think it was when was the Rangitata flood that cut the year? 2019. So, and I remember I was at Waimati at the time, and we all surged in. Yeah. So on day 3 or 4, we all came in from surrounding areas, and I think it is a model that works, and it's been relied on more and more. As in, like when Nelson had more recent events, we all surged from Canterbury into Nelson. And even Australia, we've sent people to Australia to help. So it's becoming more and more the normal practice for that surge capacity to come in from different areas. But we do also have to try and maximise the benefit of having a core team that can carry us through to 3 to 4 days at a very minimum. Yep.
We're not going to solve this here today. I'm more interested in the principle of actually making good use of this information. And you know, I think even with your comments as well, Janice and the others, Michelle, this does start to really add value to us understanding. I got into this conversation because I said it's interesting to look thematically at what was perhaps orangey red in its nature, and it was interesting that this one kept coming up. Nigel, one of the ones that I want to ask you about, it doesn't have to be you, Nigel, somebody else, was actually corporate planning. It might be you, Stephen. And look, it is there, but the LGA documents, legislative policies and consultation processes are in the orange. And I don't know whether we can get it lower. I was interested, A, in the assessment, B, I think it's probably actually pretty well done, correct, and also reflects that actually if I was looking at next year's LTP, this is probably one of the more critical documents coming up.
It's a bit of a reflection of the race to the end we often seem to have with these big corporate documents. So we're taking a lot more of a long-term planned approach to them now, which should mitigate some of the risks. We'd quite like to see those plans washed through a couple of times before we actually lower the risk, because there's no point in saying everything's good and then we're still rushing to the end a year from now. So, but we are, we're having long-term plan conversations where we have a full plan in place now for those. So, we are starting very, very early and taking a more all-of-team approach to things. So it's not all resting on one person to try and herd all the cats at the last minute. So, but it is, our timeliness and that affects our accuracy, reflects our the level of quality we're able to put forward. So it's a big focus for that department.
And one of the other issues is having council owning them. So we're planning to actually bring them in pieces a lot more to council. The various service groups, bring them early, and then hopefully once we've done them once with council, we've done them, so that they all just accumulate and suddenly you've got your LTP sorted. That's going to be quite a bit of work in terms of workshops.
Yeah, look, and can I honestly, and I'll save it for a conversation later, but one of this committee shouldn't be more worried about the actual LTP process. But actually, I just have to notice that we're sitting there. If I was, in this case, I was comparing apples and oranges, but noting where the residual risks sat with our corporate planning, and it was relatively high given the nature of the risks. Given the risks that were identified and where they sat on the residual risk register. So again, it just suggests have we got a requisite and proportionate response to where that residual resides. I'm just trying to Stephen, I'm just trying to use the documents to say, are we doing the right things?
The residuals are some of the eye of the beholder stuff, because if we miss those statutory deadlines, the ramifications they're not great, but they're not council ending level. But it is using the risk register to just put a level of seriousness onto it, as it's not really acceptable for the organisation. But whether it would ever reach the strategic risk register is a different matter.
I might argue that slightly more differently to you, but I absolutely take your point, and we've had that argument before. We've had that discussion before about residual risk is in the eye of the beholder. But for the sake of it, I will just keep moving on. One little question. If I read the paper, you discounted 3 waters.
No, they did there.
I know they've done them, but that's going to somebody else. I actually wonder. There are 3 waters transformation is a strategic risk. Come back to me the strategic risk register in December, and we don't have 3 waters transformation to a CCO as a. If it's not a risk, I can tell you now that we won't stop the meeting until we have got it on the list. If I can put it that way. I'm wondering equally, though, whether operationally there are ongoing risks. Not just delivery risks, but that are related to transformation.
At the moment, I'd expect those to come out of the project.
Yeah,
It's delivering that at the moment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of unknowns about the
Yeah.
process at the moment that we couldn't really capture in this exercise.
Yeah.
But it's one of the biggest
I understand
corporate
that, yeah.
changes of the next 2 years. So
Yeah.
it's a giant risk. not
Keep
to
us
get it right.
going. Okay, look, I'm conscious, you can see I'm trying to push myself through here because I could spend a lot of time on this one because I think it is, Stephen, it's just great to have it. And it's really rich information. So if we could just reflect from the conversation, I don't sense as much. Oh, Michelle, you want to, yeah, ask your questions because then I'd like to try and sum
Sorry,
up.
I've just got one more question or comment is, and you talked about it, the residual risk is in the eye of the beholder, and I just wonder how you're going to land on your initial risk and your residual, because there's some in there where it's been assessed if somebody doesn't pay their rent, that's almost certain to happen, whereas I would argue that 90% of people pay their rent and it might be possible but not almost certain. And then you flip to the other side, and wherever there is a possibility of death, I fail to see how you can move off the consequence of severe. You may move the likelihood to rare, but the consequence, in my mind, can never be anything but severe if death is an outcome that could be possible. So I'm just not convinced
That's
we've
one
got
of our-
this stuff quite right.
Yeah, that's one of our big arguments we've had at SLT is that, to be honest, it then makes the risk appetite line very difficult to talk about because if there are certain risks you cannot pull down below that. A lot of stuff that we do is risky behaviour. It's one of the arguments is that the possibility of it is so low and there hasn't been anything happen. This is just one of the arguments, but it's not happened in the past 20, 30 years. Therefore, but the consequence is always going to be high, and it means that some of them we just can't pull down under the line.
I agree, because it'll be rare, but it's still, the outcome is severe. And so and that just begs the question, is your table right, which is so commonly used? I would say yes, it is. I'm just not sure we're being that realistic.
That does beg the question, is there then a risk appetite for council for some things to be at that level?
It just has to be, if that, in my mind personally, it has to be, because you cannot ever, personally I would never consider an outcome of death as anything less than severe in the consequence. And if you've got it down to rare, that's the best we can do.
There's the value of the debate. Michelle, I agree. I agree entirely. And I agree with you too, Stephen. It's actually, sorry.
But the trick is, we have arguments, when you're down in red, you're down in the orange.
Yep.
Now, the arguments around SLT is you can probably never get to get it out of red, which means it's possible. It might be rare, but it's actually still possible. It's possible someone will drown at the swimming pool.
Correct, but I would say with all your mitigations you put in place, it becomes rare. It's still possible, but it's rare.
That's the debate we constantly have.
Yeah, but it's probably more the consequence I'm thinking about. Yeah.
And I think that's a future discussion about if you do amend your risk tolerance line to just take that corner out, so there's just an acceptance that there will be some things that sit there.
Yep, agreed. And so it becomes, there are some things there, so to perhaps even do the nuanced discussion between a control and a mitigation.
I mean, the worst
you get into the M's because you can't move the risk away from that terrible end. So the critical question is the mitigations we have in hand.
And I'd argue we'd probably want to have a higher tolerance than people artificially gaming it, so it looked less bad than it was.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, my point is, if we're shifting things down into the green, we won't have that focus on it, and it's almost a culture of actually we're doing okay here and everything's right, and that's a concern to me.
Thank you for that. And I'm for auditors right at the moment. I'm doing all these darn returns around fraud risk around the country, and that's exactly the situation that you get worried about. Is that fraud is not a strategic risk here. I mean, I would argue, don't tell me I'm wrong, please, Nigel, but I'm not assuming we would see fraud risk as large here. The evidence would be that it's not. I mean, it's always a risk, but it's not large. But equally, we don't want to lose sight of it. That's why I'm keen to see Narayan later on when we get to his PX stuff about his ongoing program around fraud awareness. So the question is, again, it comes back to our risk management system. If it just because it's not strategic, your point, how do we know that it's being kept in the green? That's where we've got to have that discussion around particularly around our assurance program, Stephen. That gives us a level of comfort that actually it's being controlled.
Yep, and I mean you will always get the full guts and all report once a year, which shows everything. Which I mean, there's a level of assurance from that as well. But
yeah,
yep, it's tricky because you don't want to be delving down into this level of detail every 3 months.
So when we do see this next year, say, will we see an arrow to indicate the movement, whether it's been the movement in the assessment of the inherent risk,
Yep.
or an improvement or a movement in the residual risk?
I've not found a system yet that's easily done that, or any of the ones that we have on option. It will probably just be someone going through and writing an exceptions report and just showing what the changes were.
Okay.
How we graphically presented that, it may be quite challenging, but it's a limitation of the system we have and the system we're probably going to get, I'm afraid. But we can do a comparison report and show what the exceptions are.
Yeah, because really what we're looking for, A, is an understanding of the risks, but B, that there's an improvement.
brilliant. Thank you for that, team. Stephen, that is great, and so thank you to all your, I mean, this is the staff across the council. It's really been a stimulating discussion to have this information in front of us. So, firstly, well done. Secondly, as you know, we've always got more demands for more info. So I think we've agreed on an action that to have a stronger discussion around the actual system of control. So it's going to bring us back into our risk management framework in relationship to these risks become important, and to gain an understanding of sort of the time flow of how SLT will work through this and moderate and yada, yada, yada. And I think there is also then the other aspect which isn't directly for us at this level, because that's something that I would suspect the SLT will do, but is risk appetite, because we've had an interesting debate around appetite. And ultimately we'll see the benefit as it comes through to our strategic risk profiles as well, and we get to discuss those in the new term. So that's brilliant. Thank you for that. If there's no other comments, I am going to go to the resolution, and it's a good few pages back, which is that we receive a note. Yeah, what a simple little resolution for such a good paper. I'll move it. Thank you, Michelle. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Tax. You're going to talk tax, John. Welcome to the meeting. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the pleasures of being able to present on tax.
Good.
I'm sure this is the part of the meeting everyone looks forward to. I've tried to present as comprehensive an overview as possible within the reasonable sort of framework. So I'll take the report as read. There are one or two potential areas which you might want to discuss further, so more than welcome to take questions directly.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. Okay, it's, as you say, it's a fulsome report, so you've got a strong summary there. Do folk have questions on this? Thank you, Janice.
Yeah. How is this tax program, or the review program of various aspects of tax, entirely separate to our internal audit program? Because it seems to me part of it. It's an internal review.
Yes, has traditionally been quite separate.
Okay.
However, we are working to break down that barrier and see it as a holistic sort of element of the overall. So I have discussions with risk managers frequently about where we are on these sorts of things, and giving them the comfort of knowing that we have this particular risk in hand. And this is likely to increase in terms of other financial related risks, such as the impairment review that you were talking about earlier. So under the new structure, part of the finance restructuring is to more explicitly recognise that these are risk management tasks that we should be undertaking, and that's the process that we utilise because we're the theoretical experts on it. But we make sure that concatenates into the overall risk management program so that there's no discrepancy.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
You know, if we had an internal assurance map, for instance, and I'm not suggesting we need one because we're not that mature, it would be too hard, but it would provide assurance that all these areas are covered off.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think there would be any disagreement on that at all. As the risk management environment within the council is developing, as you've seen in other areas, that it's about having the strategic overview and then drilling down to the people who are most appropriately managing particular aspects of that, but always being able to feed back into the overall assessment of risk for the whole of council and where we sit in terms of things like risk appetite, where we sit in terms of process management and improvement, interactions with other agencies, which of course is particularly significant potentially for tax. So yes, we're trying to work towards a more global view of a risk management framework, which I think we're heading towards, but certainly not there yet, as you said.
Okay. And how does there's a TDC tax group, how does the tax plan form part of the ARC scope, or is it outside of it? Does it go direct to council? I just don't understand how that all integrates. I want to know whether I need to be concerned because it's an ARC issue or I can forget about it because it goes to council.
Yes, an excellent question. Oh, I have to answer? No, there's two groups to start with, and people get confused by the TDC group, which is TDC itself, TDHL, VT, and any other sector. But this framework...
Wondering whether it was a separate oversight group.
And,
so you're just talking about the tax, the literal tax.
But this framework that we have is for the whole group, not just for the tax group. The tax group is just at the moment TDHL and TDC. But the version of the framework that was agreed by this committee previously assumes that any CCO will become part of the tax group unless there's a specific reason not to. So we still have a little discrepancy in that VT is not, but very minor discrepancy. Obviously, there are lots of implications in terms of water, where that goes. And therefore we're trying to get a settled environment before we get any more CCOs in place so that we can manage that part of the process as well. In terms of the oversight, I think at times it's a bit grey and a bit fuzzy because the subsidiaries themselves report directly to council, and no subcommittee receives reports on the subsidiaries at the moment, including this one, except by implication. Certainly when we were introducing the framework, I think it'd be fair to say, and I think Fraser would agree with this, that one of the issues that we had to address was the distinctiveness of the subsidiaries separate from any authority structure within council. So they report directly to council, and that includes tax, except that in tax it's assumed that they're part of a group, and the group reports to this committee. So the overlap is not quite as clear as it might be. We have spent quite a lot of time working with TDHL to make sure that they are aware that we're not interfering with their operational management, and that having oversight doesn't imply that people are going to start telling them what properties to buy and whatever that might be. But there are wider implications about this whole area, and I think you touched on it earlier, and certainly far beyond the scope of this meeting today.
Not the only council that has subsidiaries and holding companies, etc. Do you draw on others' experiences so you don't having to reinvent wheels?
Yes, other experiences are very mixed, as is frequently. I'm sure Mr. Chairman would agree with that. Some councils seem to have a very close, almost tight relationship with their subsidiaries, and some have descended into quite a disputatious situation where they're actively fighting, even to the extent of fighting in the courts. I think we're at the comfortable end of that. We have a working relationship with our CEO. We've worked through, and this is an example, where we've worked through some potentially difficult issues, got to an end point. It's taken longer than we would have liked, but that process has not resulted in anything other than perhaps Fraser and Andrea having a couple of harsh words occasionally about timeframes. So it's not really, that in itself is not a risk for us. I think probably in terms of where we can go in future, I think clarification of some of these processes, of some of the relationships and some of the authority levels probably is a good idea, but that is not just about tax, that's about a whole lot of other issues.
Thank you for that, Janice and John. I appreciate the conversation because it does ultimately interest me, actually, and not because I want to get my hands on a subsidiary, but I'm just interested because firstly, from a financial planning perspective, which ultimately also has tax implications, I'm always interested in the strategy we have to legitimately minimise our tax liability, which must take into account our group position, but also the flow of resources. And actually, from a financial planning perspective, what is a reasonable expectation? And again, that may or may not bring into it the issue of taxation. Because, of course, I use the word carefully, flow of resources, I just don't mean dividend. So, you're smiling there, Nigel. I'm very grateful that we have got this, but I think there's a slightly broader conversation when it comes to actually the financial planning. I don't think, to answer your question, that is necessarily directly within the purview of this committee, but I would like to know those matters were dealt with appropriately and planned rather than being ad hoc.
And presumably that goes through the letter of expectations, etc.
The letter of expectations do point out what we deem as a reasonable return. And there's also another matter that will have to go in the letter of expectation, that is adhering to the same accounting policies.
Cool.
Okay, and so, I mean, this might be ongoing discussion, but I do hear your point, John. Well done, coded. I get it, and I've seen it on some of the other papers, time that it's taken, and it's certainly not a case of overly trying to meddle where I shouldn't be meddling, or this committee shouldn't be meddling as far as that's concerned. For what it's worth, and this isn't entirely tax, in fact it isn't, it's almost non-tax, there should be a relationship between this committee and TDHL, which we don't have at the moment, but that can be a new year work on. It's not a criticism of TDHL, if anything, it's probably a criticism of the chair, not raising expectations. Okay, any other questions or comments around tax? Yes, Scotty.
Rochelle and I have got exactly the same thing circled there.
Sharing the same screen.
With regards to PwC's recommendation for the Council to consider restarting its rolling review, and when I refer back to an earlier point here that it is intended that TDC does continue to work to finally move preparation into TDC with PricewaterhouseCoopers just primarily having a review role, which is pleasing to hear because that's obviously going to represent a saving, but when it's recommending the rolling review, I just wondered how that decision is made, if it is made that we're not going to do the rolling reviews, or if they are going to happen, because I can't help but read that and say, yeah, we're going to move to doing things in-house, which is a saving and increases capability, all that sort of stuff. We get better at managing our tax and our tax risk. But this, to me, highlights something that will need to be done in order for that to be effective. Am I right?
Essentially, when it comes to tax, it's not a specialised skill that we currently have, so it's going to take a period of time to be able to bring it in-house and have confidence that, we're doing it correctly. So in the short term, there will still be a need for PwC to review that work as we work through the process.
Andrea, you'd need a separation of accountability so that when you have that expertise, it can't be auditing the work it's done itself. So I'd expect to see a role for PwC or an internal audit function, but usually it's an external party to do the audits of that work.
Mm.
Mr. Chairman, if I can throw my tuppence worth in as well. Yes, I think there's different levels of reviews. My expectation would be that we would get to the point where we have an in-house council and group tax model that we would prepare as frequently as was needed, but at least annually, and that would then be reviewed by PwC to ensure that we've picked up the required elements. And that would be an annual review that they would have to do, but that would be certainly a lot more cost-effective than what happens at the moment, which is we prepare our accounts, then we give it to PwC and say, now prepare the tax. So that's where we're trying to make that move. But we'll have an annual review of the corporate tax. Then the rolling review will be about the processes around GST, FBT and payroll. FBT, you'll have seen the report on FBT. We've largely enacted most of that now, some tidy up stuff similar to the sense of expenditure type costs. GST, we sort of interminably reviewed that over the last couple of years because of the issues that have been reported to this committee previously. So we're now parking that one, and this year or the next coming year will definitely be payroll, because that's the one where we definitely feel the least confident about compliance. Internally, the internal knowledge is probably the lowest in terms of payroll compliance, to be fair. So that's, I've had several discussions with PwC. We've agreed jointly that that is probably the best utilisation of them in this next coming cycle. But then you'll see from their plan that they've presented, and we've discussed their plan, so it's not just them saying, here we do this, is that the anticipation is that over a number of years we would roll through all of those, but obviously those reviews should get shorter, more poignant, more less issues, because we resolve those issues and move on, not let's reiterate the same issues again and again and again. But by bringing it in-house, we allow that external focus that effectively we can then be audited about our processes, whereas at the moment we just surrender it to PwC and just say, right, whatever you say, unless there was something we really fundamentally disagreed with, which would be pretty unlikely, we just take their numbers. And we're trying to move away from the position where we take other people's numbers, whether it's advisors, tax advisors or auditors or anybody else, and do it ourselves and then have it audited/reviewed. And we think that's more efficient for council as well.
Brilliant. No trouble with that, I think, as an approach, John. I think your point, Janice, is the review should be done by somebody that's independent from the preparer.
Hadn't appreciated how much work they did on our behalf.
Yes, which is a good point. We should know how to prepare the numbers effectively, you're saying, John, and I agree. Okay, Michelle, sorry, you had a question.
No, so you've pretty much answered my question, but now I have another one, is how does this committee get visibility over that? So this report that you've just brought to us, it doesn't seem to be on an annual work plan, but is that something that we get every year? And so that we know that, yes, you have undertaken the PAYE external audit or the payroll, external audit. And yeah, so how do we make sure that we don't lose visibility?
So I'll answer that question. So traditionally in the past, yes, it has come, but then there was a change in personnel and it got missed. So this should be an annual report that comes up every year, yes.
And it should be added to the work plan, I guess.
Yep,
Yeah.
it should be added to our work plan,
So
yeah.
then one just quick question. I know under the PAYE we had a late payment penalty and we didn't have an explanation like we did for the other ones, and I get stuff happens, but have we made some changes to ensure that doesn't happen again, I guess, is my main concern.
Yes, they are now looking on a regular basis. It was a timing of when the 20th of the month fell.
Well, Janice, we don't have an assurance plan, but I do think we could have some semblance of its thinking in this. So I do think as part of our, I guess our internal audit reporting, we should have this integrated into it, albeit we recognise that the work is carried out by PwC. So Stephen, for that, I would expect when PwC in 2026 do their PAYE standalone review, we get to see the report. And it comes at the time that they've completed it, not in any form of annual review. Whereas things like external advice sort on major issues, assuming it's not ones that need to involve us to get the annual summary of the advice we've sought, would be good, because it goes back to indeed some of the strategy you've got, John, which is actually we do control the preparation of the numbers. Presumably that's going to minimise, you're starting to see the impact of that. So I think we can get a halfway house at the very least in terms of assurance.
It could be that the internal audit plan includes the audits of those items.
Absolutely.
Nari, and it's just shown as the provider is PwC as opposed to internal.
And that's what I'd be used to, because I, again, have a number of hybrid situations around the country we would have. So I'm only parroting what we do elsewhere. So that'd be good. Okay, thank you for that. There's no other questions. John, thank you for the hard yards on this and indeed the fulsome report. It's great. It is great to see. So we have a motion to receive and note the tax management report. Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Michelle. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Well, we're up to the annual report update, but will we wait for our auditors to come for that one? I think would be the wise thing, correct? Yeah, I think we do. Okay, we'll wait. Might as well just try and deal with that all in one go. How are folk going? Do they need a 5-minute break? You've been going for an hour and a half. We're okay? Keep going? Yes? Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so let's deal to the continuous improvement, please, I think is the next one. Given I'll come back to the annual report at 11:30 with our external auditors. G'day, Sam.
G'day. Kia ora. Right, I'll just provide a couple of updates from the report. So the first one being Pulse. So Pulse is designed to streamline HR processes across the employee life cycle. It's being developed in phases with the recruitment module completed and undergoing user acceptance testing. While the onboarding module is scheduled to commence in September 25, with the full project go live planned for the end of. And then we have Flowingly. So there's two components to Flowingly. We have processes and the risk module. Ongoing training sessions are being held with all employees across the organisation on processes. So we're busy capturing what that looks like. And we also are working with Flowingly and our IT team to develop a risk management report through Power BI. Yep, so that's the updates. Happy to take any questions or feedback.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate that. Questions for people? Janice.
Sam, last time Flowingly seemed to be impacting, there seemed to be delays that were, or people were waiting for Flowingly to be ready to, it was used as a reason for delays and other things. Is Flowingly now operative and not causing those delays? Is it used throughout the organisation?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it is being used. There are no more delays. The process side has gone live. People are able to use it. We're also looking at the processes that were migrated from ProMap and just reviewing them because a lot of them need updates.
Yeah.
It's just the risk management side that we're busy developing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I might have thoughts on that one, but I'll deal with that under PX. Okay, brilliant. Anything else folk would like to raise? Yes, Michelle.
Just to let you all know that there's a business case being put together. It's nearly complete to replace Authority with their up to their latest version, Civica's latest version, which is called Altitude, which will be on the, what do they call that thing? Cloud.
Mate, you're making yourself sound old there, Nigel. Can I say that, mate?
But any other system that we bring in, we are making sure it integrates with Altitude. So Pulse does. There's another system being looked at for payroll, for payable, which is a system to actually change how we collect our accounts receivable. So that's linked straight in. And were you talking about a payroll one as well for timesheets? So we're looking at one for there, and they all integrate. So we're making progress.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you. Yes, Michelle.
I guess a higher level question is how do you decide what to include in this report and not what to? Because, you know, we've heard recently about a new system that the building team, Andrea's just talked about a payroll system, and I'm just wondering how this all works. Because you've obviously got some that are used across all of council, which are in here, but then there's some, you know, that just happen all the time without anyone, well, without us seeming to know about it. Not that that's a bad thing, but I just wonder the difference between what's in this report and everything else that just happens.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's an excellent question because that has come up on my radar, and I was hoping to catch up with either Janice or Bruce so we can decide on what should be going on in these reports, because there is a lot of other stuff that is internal that perhaps is not being presented on here, but yeah, I'm happy to add that in. And mostly like the systems that Nigel's mentioned, for example, payable and all those sorts of things, we do add them in once the business case has been approved. Yep. Yeah, thank you.
It may be useful, I think that's perhaps the point you're getting to here, Michelle, a bit like the information you've given us, Nigel, actually what's coming up, what is the program probably on an annual basis as to where you see continuous improvement going. Sam, you may not have started something because it's somewhere further down the track, but to have that broader, I mean, this is under the sense of continuous improvement, and I sense here we're wanting to affirm, you know, cost-effective and timely investment which delivers benefits in key systems and processes. So, you know, some sort of definition around that would make sense.
I think the title might be wrong because this is going to morph. Once that ISSP gets done,
yeah,
this is going to be morphing into a, well, unless you want two reports, what have we got planned from the ISSP and what is being delivered? And they're being couched at the moment as continuous improvement. Not all continuous improvement needs a new system.
That's
but
right.
These are all new systems. So effectively, at some point, we need to think about how do you separate those two things.
Good.
Yeah.
Janice?
Oh, I was just thinking about what Sam said. So what's on here is council-wide. They come on here when the business case is approved. But what about the ones that are used in parts of the organisation but not across the whole organisation? They must have business cases that need approval too.
Well, I think that goes back to Nigel's point. What are we looking at here? And if we go to an ISP type focus, we're going to capture those.
Yeah,
I think is actually the.
I just don't quite understand what Sam covers if she's not covering all of that.
Because we've had a history where various departments go and get their own systems, and we're pulling back on that. And some of those systems are put in with no business case.
Sam, that would make perhaps we're going to have a massive meeting in December, Janice, I think, but this would be good in December if we could have that sort of discussion. So it is a wee bit about actually what is the best way, and perhaps there are two things there. One is clearly, a focus. What happens when we get the ISSP, Justin, and actually what is the way in which this committee can help benefit monitoring that. Now, I'm open, Nigel, as to whether there isn't, but I'm interested in that broader concept of continuous improvement. Now, if we, a lot of it in council defaults back to what does the auditor or the internal auditor tell us as improvement, but that's sort of like, cool, that's looking backwards. Continuous improvement to me is something about proactive. We've looked in on our organisation. We know there are things that we can do better and want to do better or have ways of improving. I just would be interested as to whether there is that sort of thinking. I'm sure there is, mate. There is that sort of thinking, but equally, is that something that would be a benefit for this committee to monitor?
So we've moved Sam's reporting line to Justin, so she's now part of that IT team.
Yep.
And I think the trick is if you give that IT team too much rope, you'll get all sorts of things happening because if you give them an idea, they'll run with it and develop something. Yeah. So the ISSP will actually help us to get that under control. But there's also departments, we've got to make sure that also it's the departments that actually will come up with those ideas. They need to be fed through so that Sam can pick them up. And flowingly is probably the one where we put those in and say, are there steps here that are missing? It's a bit like, what do they call that? Lean thinking. Yeah. Remove the steps that you don't need.
Okay, well, look, we'll step through this. Clearly, December would be something to understand broader, and I think you might have even mentioned already, Justin, around the ISSP. So we'll see where this gets to, but to have that up, to put a bit of, I think, to go back to Michelle's original question, a bit more holistic form around this, so we know where we're going.
And we've seen that now because, like the payable one, there's been two systems that have come up recently. And they just come out of the blue because we don't have the ISSP, but they're good. Like the payable one went up to SLT, and because we've got the broader team there now, it got quite challenged because it was put up looking at rates, but the team challenged them to say, well, actually it should do everything, which is capable of doing. So that was a good challenge.
Great. That's good.
Bruce, just a note, the name probably is wrong because continuous improvement shouldn't be one responsibility, one project. It should be a way of operating.
And that's why I said if there is if it's relevant, a more continuous improvement lens, as in contrast to ISSP, although there will be strong overlap, it would be interesting to understand if that is, shall we say, in existence, in which case, how do we deal with that? Okay, can we go to the resolution, please, which we receive and note? I'll move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Scotty. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you.
Can I just quickly say to Sam, thank you for putting the colour key on that on that report. It made much more sense to me this time.
Oh, thank you for remembering that, Michelle. We should always be complimentary of those matters which, we make requests and they come. It's good to acknowledge it. So thank you, Sam. Appreciate your work. Elliot, I wonder if we could move into the legislative compliance, please. That'd be great. Thank you. If I could just make a couple of comments. I was really pleased to see this, Elliot, in terms of timing, as we had, I don't know if you were here for the work program, but the discussion we had around getting ourselves ready to try and give a level of leadership to the incoming council to adopt the annual report, letter of rep that the two Nigels sign. A key part of this is that we comply with legislation. So timing is superb. Thank you. Elliot, in your hands.
Cool. Good morning. Through the Chair, pleased to provide the legislative compliance update. It's a receive and note paper. The advice is that it's open to Council to conclude that it is legislatively compliant for the financial year ending 25. There are 4 legislative functions where I note minor non-compliances, and I'll just run through those. Firstly, the Water Services Act. We continue to have some technical non-compliances with water services consents, and these are reported in a number of places. And I've discussed with officers, and it's really, it sounds like an issue with the wording in the consents and a technical matter that I've received assurances that they have no health or environmental risks being reported to the regulators, and on that basis, there's no impediment there to legislative compliance. In respect of the information requests, I just note there we did 176, 2 were 1 day late, 1 was 5 days late, immaterial in my opinion. The Resource Management Act. So this is a reoccurring sort of issue across the country around monitoring in respect to the resource management space. Last year's report noted papers by the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment noting these issues. And I've addressed there, or suggested there, that ultimately it's a strategic resourcing question for the Council, and perhaps one that's best to be grappled with in light of the expected repeal and replacement of the RMA. I'll come back to that when I address the LIM amendments. Finally, not finally actually, there's one other one. So penultimately, there's Trespass Act issues, just some reasonings, just some recording of reasons for the trespass and details of service. Those are really minor issues, but they were thankfully really easy to identify in the trespass register. And with the amendments to the delegations, I've got an email chain with the new delegation holders where I'll provide them with details as to the register templates, policy and advice around that. The asbestos regulations. So this is a statutory duty that is not in the delegation manual, and so it is going to be in the new triennium. And reviewing the register of asbestos management plans, it was clear that some of them were due for review. That's part of the duties, and so that register itself is a little bit deficient because you can't tell. You actually have to go in and unpack each of these asbestos management plans and to identify whether or not they're up to date or not. So that's a relatively easy fix, and I've provided some practical advice to the property team and the health and safety team, joining them together on, I think, what is a practical way of walking through the asbestos duties. So this exercise has, it's got its frustrations, but it also, this year's been a little bit more, I think there's a little bit more utility here, and with the new triennium, I can see some opportunities for adding utility, and that's where at paragraph 8 I note a couple suggested additions to the delegation manual to enable one of the risks here, which is that we're doubling up, that these functions are being reported in other places, and maybe that reporting is sufficient for legislative compliance to be demonstrated simply through that reporting, and so that's what I want to capture. And it's amazing how much legislative compliance assurance you can get out of a register, and so I'm really keen to list the registers for statutory functions in the delegation manual. Then finally, the committee has quite rightly identified an issue or a concern around ensuring that we're up to speed with legislative reform. So I've spent some time with other councils' delegation manuals and the PCO office list of legislation, and so I've listed there at paragraph 9 a series of amendments to the delegation manual to address that. And then at paragraph 10, some stuff coming down the track. Most significantly, putting aside RM reform, which is a moving east at the moment, is the LIMS. And so there is a team internally working with IT and planning. We've also been working with ECAN, who have new obligations here, and so we're meeting Wednesday to continue with the implementation process for that, which goes live 17 October 25.
Thanks, Elliot. That's Brilliant. And the appendix is really the evidence of what looks like quite a substantial level of interviews you've done across the organisation to reach the higher level conclusions you've got inside your report. No questions for Elliot? Yes, Janice?
You've obviously spoken to a lot of people. Are there signed assurances, or is this sufficient from this report through to council sufficient?
I have my own personal notes from those meetings, but what you have assurance-wise is that annex.
Yeah. It's really a question for Nigel, council, I guess, is there this sufficient assurance? And it should be, it's just whether formally it is. And Nigel, are you confident that staff beyond the GMs understand the regulatory legislative compliance requirements?
Yes, I do.
Cool.
I think it depends on the area though, but yes.
So from I'm always interested, as you well know, Elliot, from past discussions, I'm always interested in process. So you've approached this by being aware of the legislative universe, if I can call it that way. Primarily, you've looked at how that's been incorporated into the delegations register, correct? And therefore, you've spoken with the responsible officers as how they've exercised that delegation.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
which is the way of getting it. Oh, and you've also included here that you've obviously spoken to Nigel about his own
Yes.
Obligations, which he hasn't delegated or can't be delegated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although a lot of those are just the maintenance of a pecuniary interest register, and they're quite simple ones to identify the assurance on their own.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So paragraph 7 is the key one, I think, isn't it? Am I correct? Given the lack of materiality in the above issues, so those were the
Yes.
4.5 issues that you've raised with us, or that will be addressed prior to finalisation in reports available. It's available. I love that phrase, by the way. It's available to council to conclude that it continues to be legislatively compliant. Well, I'd like to just test, is it not is it available, but do we conclude? You might say, well, Bruce, that's a question for your committee. But I'm looking at you. There is no reason, therefore, based on your work, why we can't conclude that we're legislatively compliant.
The question of materiality is for the decision maker. My advice is that these identified 5 issues are non-material. People might have a different view on the asbestos regulations, hence why I've sort of slightly identified them differently, because it's a clear obligation for them to be reviewed every 5 years, and it was not able to be identified, and people have views on that, but I'm comfortable that the property team can address that in time for the report.
Brilliant. Oh, you're saying they can address that issue in time for the annual report. Brilliant. Okay, good. Well, it might be on the 7th. Good to get clearance for Nigel, if that's, or actually it'll be the 31st, that by the 31st that's been done, which is great. Okay, look, thank you for that. I'm comfortable that you've got a process that's got rationale and reason behind it, and it would be difficult to say what more probably you could do. I'm comfortable that we take the availability that you've provided us to say that at this stage we are in a position of comfort about complying, and there are non-compliances, but I'll take your advice that they are not material at this stage. Anybody else want a different? Yes, Michelle?
Just a quick question. I just wonder how this paper interlinks with our risk register, because there's quite a few things on here that should be considered a risk, and I just want to make sure they're working together.
Yeah, that's kind of the risk with this exercise, that it's not as integrated with the balance of the organisation as possible, because it's kind of organic, and that's what hopefully I can address through the new Trinium's delegations, and why in my conversations with officers I've been probing them around how they are reporting in other areas, and then capturing that as much as I could into the annex to then populate the delegations manual with the register and reporting, so that we actually have that line of sight at that point where an officer should be going to identify whether or not they have the power so that then they will be prompted to record in the register and note the reporting expectations for that function.
So just a more specific question, if I may, is like the Resource Management Act monitoring, I would think is quite a big risk to council, and do we actually have that on either our strategic or operational risk register?
I guess listening today, I could hear people, a risk around whether or not the district plan is, what was it, fit for purpose. That's a question you don't want to interrogate through the Schedule 1 process in the RMA, because by then it's slightly too late and all of a sudden you're into quite a tight, structured, natural justice driven adversarial process that's really expensive, and so there are other ways of doing that, namely Section 35 monitoring, and so I think that benefit is often lost when decisions are being made around what kind of monitoring a council wants to do. Often it gets caught up in, are we going to be proactive about resource consents? Are we going, to what extent are we going to lean into biodiversity? I think there's an opportunity for a bigger piece of work around what we are doing monitoring-wise for the district. But how that sits with resource management reform is, yeah.
Yes, so perhaps what you're saying in a pre-reform basis, this may have taken more effort to look into, whereas we're really waiting on reform now.
Yeah, I'm in discussions with the planning manager about the capacity to start leaning into that review of ongoing resource consents. There's some really low-hanging fruit, I think, there. But it needs to be conscious of how that reform plays out. But and also giving the council the decision-making authority over what that strategically looks like for the district. So those are options I would imagine the next annual plan process would want to grapple with, because we'd start to see some indications around how RM reform is going to look there, what will remain. I would hope that the National Policy Statement for Urban Development does remain, because that's where a lot of this good reporting can occur, particularly the fit for purpose of the planning regime. Yeah.
Okay. You happy with that, Michelle? Comfortable.
Yeah. Sorry.
Happy is the wrong word. Comfortable.
My point really is that you've highlighted some risks here, and to make sure they're on the risk register.
Yep. I mean, they were highlighted last year too.
Great. Thank you. So, folk, we have been asked to receive a note, but as I said, I'm wanting to reflect that out of this we are taking a firm level of comfort. I'm trying to find the right adjective there, or something out of that adverb, is it? Out of it, that actually this is a very helpful report, Elliot, thank you. It gives us a level of assurance which should be sufficient to enable Nigel to sign off letter of rep to the auditors that we've complied legislatively. So I'm going to move that we receive a note. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Janice. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. I've been advised of any urgent business. We are, or of a minor nature, we are half an hour before the auditors get here. But I just think if it's okay with you, we might, I keep asking, do people need a break? You need a break? 5 minutes, okay. Can we be back at 5 past? Hold it, before we go, can I just move into PX? Because we will have to move out of PX when the auditors come.
But it says, so your plan is just for the stream, so you're going to move back out of PX to C6 points.
So you're saying we should just consider the annual report now?
Well, it's up to you. It's just if we keep the stream running, but we can.
Oh, okay, we're streaming. Okay.
Well,
can somebody just text Rudy and Jenna and see if?
No, it's not a problem. It's just a technical issue. Are you planning on coming back out of PX for that paper?
Well, I'd have to, because it's in public, but I'm just.
No, that's fine.
We've been given their time, and I just want to keep moving.
Yep. No, that's absolutely perfect.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
it's not too much of a hassle.
It's not a hassle or anything.
I mean, I should make a public announcement and apologise to anybody that's following on stream that we are ducking and diving, but we are in the hands of some externals here, so I'd be keen to keep it moving that way.
Perfect.
Rightio. Okay. Let's move then to the resolution to go into public acceptance on page 167 for the reasons that are stated and for the items that are attached. I think they're reasonable. I'm going to move from here. We go into PX. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Scotty. I'll take yours. Is there any discussion on that motion? Are we all happy? In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll just wait a couple of moments while we get the place back open, and we look forward to being able to, we are able to see on screen. G'day, Rudy and Jenna, how are you guys going? All right, can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Can you hear us?
Brilliant, Rudy, we can hear you as well. Jenna, lovely to see you too. Great that you can be with us, guys. We're just waiting to, are we okay to go now? Yeah, Rudy, we've got we've been in advance of the program, so we have just come out of PX with the view to deal with item 6.9 on the agenda, which is the annual report, and I'll ask whoever needs to speak to it first, and then I'll ask you in public, Rudy and Jenna, to give any updates you want to have. Once that's done and we've moved the adoption of this paper, we will go back into PX and we'll have some committee-only time with you two, all before midday, believe it or not. Okay, Andrea, Ashley, who's going to kick this one off for me, please? Steph is, okay, well, that's the way it goes. I get the wrong person, so go for it, Steph.
Thank you, and through the chair, so I'll take the report as read. This is really just to provide an opportunity for conversation around where we're at with the annual report ahead of audit really kicking off next week. We're on track at the moment. We do have a huge week ahead, particularly until Thursday lunchtime when we provide the full first draft of the document. Yes, happy to take questions.
You were here, Steph, when we made discussion about our program and how we as a committee would try and deal with this prior to the 7th. Were you here then?
No, I don't think so.
No, you may not have been. Look, and this will be useful for Rudy and Jenna to hear as well. I remember in the dealing with the audit committee program, we agreed that when you produce your draft on Thursday, you'll also circulate me and Janice as the independents, and at a yet unknown time, we'll get our heads together with you guys with our thoughts on that, so that as you head towards the October the 7th, where I think Council will formally receive the draft and pass it on, you've got the benefits of the comments of the independent members, at least on the committee. Actually, there'd be no reason why you couldn't circulate to all the committee if they wanted to do the hard yards, actually. I think it would make a lot of sense. And if you and I are meeting, I would welcome anybody else to come and join us as well at the same time. Might as well do it that way. It's informal, but it will just then add to the meeting on the 7th, I would hope, with that adoption with the receiving of the draft financials on the 7th of October, Steph. So we've got that in mind. That happened obviously before you were in the room. Is there anything else that we should note other than process here? Auditors start next week, draft this Thursday. Anything else, or will I invite Rudy and Jenna to speak to us? Andrea, are we okay? Rightio, thanks Rudy, Jenna. Any thoughts from your side? Obviously it's we're all getting ready for battle. So hopefully with the draft on Thursday it'll proceed.
Yeah, thanks Bruce. Yes, I can confirm that looking at Audit Dashboard, this is a heavy week for council officers. Just have to note that we've obviously shared with the team the Audit New Zealand model financial statements. We have any comments we made on last year's annual report in the management letter, and we've also managed to do a bit of a review of the pro forma that was provided to us earlier. Those comments have gone to management as well. So yes, I am under strict instruction, and this is quite a serious matter. If the deadlines are not met, the audit doesn't start. So the key things for me for delivery on the 18th would be the annual report, the final trial balance, and then a full transaction listing. So that will allow us to at least map 2025 into our audit software. And obviously, if we have the full transaction listing, it'll allow us to do some sample selection and keep busy until other information is provided. But according to Audit Dashboard, probably 90% of the information is due on the 18th. The roading valuation we've already received and the audit of that is complete. So thank you to council officers for supplying that. We've received some guidance from the OAG on water done well disclosures. I've already shared that with the team. So those are sort of disclosures that the Office of the Auditor General would expect to see in an annual report. I don't think I've got anything else. Obviously, TDHL, I'm not involved in the audit. Jenna's the manager, but they've got a 30 September deadline. I assume they're tracking well, and the information will be with council officers to actually incorporate into the financials of council.
Thanks, Rudy. Any problems with that? I know it's a big week. You said, Steph, it's a big week, but obviously from an audit perspective, Rudy's been up front. Draft annual report, we look like we got that right, but trial balance and transactional listing? Listing. Any issues with that going to them?
No.
No? Okay. We're comfortable? Sweet. Oh, that's good. Well, it's good to hear. Thank you for that, Rudy. Appreciate where we're at. Is there anything else then that we need to discuss? As I said, it's preparing for battle. Anybody else want to engage in this?
Can I just make a comment re TDHL?
Yeah, sure.
So we have received a draft set of accounts from TDHL. However, from a group perspective, there's some information that we're still waiting for, specifically around the associate information. So hopefully we'll get that information in a timely manner so that we can actually incorporate that into the annual report.
That would relate primarily to the notes, the accounts, rather than the actual derived results?
Yes.
Yeah. We want a complete draft, I suspect would be the ideal. Okay, is there anything that we need to do at this? I appreciate we're in public here, but is there anything we can do to help? Is there a phone call that can be made? Yeah, there will be. I think it would be helpful. Thank you. Rightio. Okay, so there's been up front with you already. Just a wee bit of challenge of getting all the information out. Any other questions folk would like to raise? No? Okay, so look, that's really useful. And I jest about it being a battle because I was comfortable already that you and Jenna already worked with the team last year, and I do hope that that is the case again this year, that we can have that degree of cooperation and going both ways and regular reporting, which is good. So can we just move to the resolution, which is that we receive and note this report? I'll move it. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Michelle. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Right. Again, with apologies to those that might be on public online, I need to pass a motion that we go back into public excluded. Our first item will be dealing with the auditors. We've already passed the resolution which includes this, so I just want to make it procedurally correct. We just lost our auditors, have we? I'm going to move that we go back into PX. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Nigel. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you.